morning, everybody. It's an honour to be here, and I would like to thank in particular the leadership of New Zealand First and the Honourable Winston Peters for having me here today. It's a big step up for me to be speaking. And thank you, Ro, for the humbling introduction and for all the work that you do to bring common sense and safety back to women's sport. Our girls need us more than ever. As Rose said, the Law Commission this week recommended adding gender identity as a protected ground. This announcement on Thursday, while I was preparing for this presentation, makes what I'm about to show you even more relevant and urgent. Our law firms are captured. Chris Hipkins recently mentioned on an interview with Mike Hosking that their law firm, Denton's, recommended he not appear before the Royal Commission of Inquiry into COVID-19. Denton's is just one of many law firms strongly associated with the trans movement. For example, Sian Wilson, Chair of the Board of Governors at King's College in Auckland, is a pro bono partner at big law firm Simpson Grierson. She came to my attention when an old boy from King's reached out to me in consternation because King's was going the whole hog with pride. Sure enough, in 2022, Sian received a Rainbow Excellence Award for Executive Leadership. Simpson Grierson is one of the many Pride Pledge law firms in New Zealand. Go and look her up, Sian Wilson, King's College. Law firms sign up to something called the Gender Equality Charter. Look for it on law firm websites. Hopefully by the end of my presentation, you'll better understand that gender equality is not the same as sex-based rights. Even if you don't believe me, can you see that in New Zealand, there isn't extreme gender inequality? The lobbyists and activists make it appear so to create their narrative, which is totally ludicrous when you also have men masquerading as women, decrying women's rights, whilst erasing actual women's rights. It's dystopian. Anyway, I'll kick off with a short video.
USAID, the NGOs, they'll submit what they call a baseline assessment or strategic assessment to the State Department, where they will do a demographic segmentation of all the demographics in the country, who's pro us, who's against us in the region, and then they will micro-target the grants in the capacity building to capacity build the burning ember to turn it into a flame. And then they will micro-target the grants in the capacity building to capacity build the burning ember to turn it into a flame.
We are deeply concerned that the Deputy Prime Minister has doubled down on disinformation and is actively fanning flames of hatred towards the beautiful rainbow community, risk of real violence. These threats are driven by dangerous conspiracy thinking and are amplified by Destiny's Church and the Deputy Prime Minister. We've seen Destiny Church physically attack people at drag story time based on the deeply dangerous trope that the rainbow community presents a danger to children.
I've also said that you're fanning dangerous conspiracy theories.
Oh, look, this is identity politics at its worst.
So this is a page for gender minorities about activism. So again, you see that they're lobbyists and they're activists, which I don't think that charities should be political. I'm pretty sure they get kicked out of the Charities Commission for doing that. Anti-transgender extremism. This is the crux of the political playbook. It's about identifying, preventing and countering anti-transgender extremism. By the way, if those words are confusing for you, what they're saying is us.
Sorry, what? They're saying that's us?
Yeah, anyone who's not them or an ally of them is called an anti-transgender extremist.
Oh, so we can't question this?
Uh-huh.
No. Oh, so we're supposed to just roll over like the media do and just go, oh, we can't talk about this?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
So this guide provides practical advice on recognising, preventing and countering anti-transgender extremism. So what they're doing with Winston Peters, because he's questioned a non-binary member of parliament, is they're going to tag him with these. He'll be an anti-trans discrimination.
Their rule book for that, okay.
And anti-trans stereotypes is anyone who is saying there are two sexes. Anyone who's been watching my stuff knows that I'm not against a person, I'm against the ideology. And that's what most of us are talking about. So they turn it into this personal attack. And And we're not usually doing a personal attack. We're usually questioning the biological facts, the political narrative, where the money is going. But woe betide you do that, because then you're an anti-transgender extremist. And I've been called a transphobic, homophobic bigot because I ran a parents' meeting questioning some of the stuff in Nelson, and the deputy mayor there, who is queer, he states that he was the one who complained. So he then uses this playbook or something similar to it. They describe and prescribe how and what we are and how to deal with us, which means going after us in social media, going after us personally, coming to our events and protesting. Right. And all we are a bunch of heterosexual people, maybe not even heterosexual people, maybe a lesbian and gay people. In fact, they come to my meetings. I'm friends with them too. Who know that this is what it is. They want to have access to our children, but they don't want the parents to have access to their own children. The one event that they have that they pin everything on is the Posey Parker event. And now they're going to pin the Benjamin Doyle event. At the organised and enforced end of anti-trans extremism is far-right, ultra-conservative political interests and fascism, and they start talking about Nazism. Remembering that this is funded through the government and private grants and organisations. This to me is the playbook in New Zealand of all of the groups that are pushing this ideology. They're not coming from a place of caring for genuine people who are expressing distress or trauma or have gender dysphoria. They're, I believe, a hate group calling us a hate group.
It's quite fascinating showing that again, because the conversation of that whole video was about Benjamin Doyle. Who's heard the latest? Yeah. Stuff about this space that I research in was coming in so thick and fast this week, I couldn't even put the most recent stuff in what I'm talking to you about today. But I did a big video when everything broke about him a few months ago, basically showing why the media was supporting him. So you can go and have a look at that on my YouTube channel. So who had heard about that booklet before? Oh, not many. I know that there are some that did. I spoke about it on Sean Plunkett about a month or so ago, and we got that out to a wider audience, but it's something that everybody in New Zealand needs to see. So if you're troubled by the now blatant hatred displayed towards anyone who dares question the trans community, which I call the TQ industry, I implore you to look at the book. Of note, as I mentioned, it is currently on the New Zealand Police website, on their Diversity Liaison Officer's page. DEI and the TQ industry are a giant, insatiable beast. So how did we end up here? The ambulance, a very broken ambulance, at the bottom of a very big cliff. Hang on tight, because I'm going to walk you through some of the key puzzle pieces over the next few minutes. The activists and lobbyists will never ease off and say that they got everything that they lobbied for. Remember this is not a civil rights movement. There is nothing civil about them. We mustn't let the few silence the many. In May 2023, I spoke at my son's school board meeting, asking questions about the relationship and sexuality education, or RSE, content being taught. In that speech, I quoted Mr. Peters. He said at the time, "Our schools have no right, role or place teaching our young children this kind of sociologically driven doctrine. This is not education. This is a deliberate social engineering program designed and controlled by the virtue signalling woke without any legal authority at all." Despite the great campaigning by New Zealand First, despite following through on the coalition promise in April with the announcement of the removal of the relationship and sexuality education guidelines from the Ministry of Education, our children are still being taught sexually explicit, factually untrue, and ideological harmful content in class. Removing guidelines has not removed class content. So today, rather than show you more of this content, I'll show you how I have come to see that in fact there is legal authority and how that came to be. Because knowledge is power, and if we can see the problem clearer, hopefully together we can find real solutions before the next election. So how did society become inverted? I developed this diagram a few months ago for a seminar here in Palmerston North at Vision Church, where I spoke alongside Family First and the Free Speech Union. It was called Family, Faith and Free Speech. So it's my take so far, based on my own research. So I'm going to walk you through the 7 stages of the funnel that I've identified. So it starts with step 1, international non-government organisations, including the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organisation, and others who influence governments, media, and finance globally. At step 2, international human rights, which has strategic influence in international human rights law and influences many countries' human rights commissions, including ours. At step 3, we've got New Zealand lobby groups. Government and corporate funded charities, which are exempt from tax, with United Nations and international connections. They lobby and advise government agencies and ministries. Here in New Zealand, that includes Inside Out, Rainbow Youth, the Te Whanawhana Trust, run by Elizabeth Kerekere, Gender Minorities Aotearoa, which I just showed you one of their documents, the teachers' unions, the Mental Health Foundation, and many, many more. At step 4, we have New Zealand legislation and policies. These are influenced by the lobbyists, and they impact at not only national but at regional levels, and that's done in part through diversity, equity and inclusion and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. At step 5, education, religion, healthcare and so on. So government agencies, academia, public and corporate sectors and religion, etc., all implement these legislations and policies, in part in order to receive funding and compliance with such things as the ESG or environmental, social and governance scores from the United Nations. At step 6, social conditioning, media and social media driven social conditioning, entertainment, sport, and all of those things that we love so much, which has created cancel culture, extreme political opinions, and the inability to discuss and debate, the loss of free speech and freedom of expression for most. And then here we are at step 7, an inverted society, godless, voiceless, immoral. Our families are impacted. There is pressure on our healthcare services, our economy, our educational outcomes are failing miserably, and we're in financial decline and more. Sorry for the sobering message. I'm just going to talk a little bit about stage 2 around international human rights. So there has been a decades-long multi-pronged attack on biological reality and the family unit. For example, the International Bill of Gender Rights, IBGR, was drafted and adopted by the International Conference on Transgender Law and Employment Policy back in 1993. I was still in high school back in 1993. I had no idea this was going on, as most of us wouldn't have. At the time of their creation, these rights were not legally binding, but the goal was that they were adopted by the United Nations and become recognised in legislation. In order to do this, what did they need? They needed activists, influential and wealthy activists. They needed a lot of money. They needed people in high places. Oh, and they needed the media. Don't forget that. And they needed the universities, where our teachers are taught. With the benefit of hindsight, when I read about these rights and I see that they were developed by a transgender law group, I see the oppressor-oppressed narrative. We can hear the warning bells. It's radical activism touted as human rights, kindness, and anti-discrimination. So what is gender? Let's hold that thought for a minute. In 2006, something called the YOGYAKARTA Principles were written. Has anybody heard of the YOGYAKARTA Principles? 1 or 2 people. Mr. Peters, have you heard of them? He has. So named because the first meeting took place in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. The result was 29 principles on the application of international human rights law in relation to sexual orientation and gender identity. The goal of this document was to deconstruct sex, replace it with gender, and their strategy included using the United Nations as their vehicle to do so. In 2020, Jeff Holloway wrote a paper called The Background to the Yogyakarta Principles, published on ResearchGate. He says, the genesis of the Yogyakarta Principles is a horror story. That is the only way to describe it, involving several key people, legal strategies, and well-organised public relations events, all designed to replace the term sex with gender. These principles were, at that time, non-binding on any nation, NGO, or in any law. So, who were the key people behind the development of these principles? This is important because it wasn't just any benign group looking out for the greater good of humankind. They were people on a mission, and powerful people at that. For more information, look up Jennifer Billick, world-renowned researcher and publisher on following the people, the money, and the NGOs who created the trans movement. So first up, we have Martine Rothblatt. Martine Rothblatt is a transsexual transhumanist. American, born male, identifying as a woman. A lawyer, an author, very wealthy entrepreneur. He created, and I'm going to use their biological pronouns, by the way, let's all do that. He created a robot replica of his wife, Bina, with the intention of installing Bina's consciousness into the robot so that they can live in cyberspace indefinitely. Phyllis Fry is a transsexual, American-born male, identifying as a woman, a lawyer and the first transgender judge based in Texas. He is referred to as the grandmother of the transgender movement. Then we have Stephen Whittle, a transsexual, British, born female, identifying as a man, a legal professor and trans activist. She was the president of the World Professional Association for Transgender Healthcare, WPATH, from 2007 to 2009, so just after these guidelines were written, these principles, and a key person at something called Press for Change, which was an influential trans lobby group in the UK in the 1990s. And then finally we have Christine Burns, a transsexual, British, born male, identifying as a woman. Known as an activist and a business person, also involved in Press for Change, and since 2007 has devoted his time to the political sphere, where he became a key advisor and political strategist for the trans movement. Confronting? In 2017, 10 more principles were developed, called the YOGYAKARTA Principles plus 10. So I'll read this out. Additional principles and state obligations on the application of international human rights law in relation to sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and sex characteristics to complement the YOGYAKARTA principles. In short, the goal was to enshrine gender rights into human rights law worldwide. The strategy was to go from non-binding to binding. To do that, they needed the United Nations and other NGOs and to infiltrate international human rights law and the human rights commissions in each country. They have done that, including here in New Zealand. Key people involved, leaders of international trans lobby groups and key United Nations personnel. I've got more information on that coming out soon. So, what is sexual orientation? To understand the significance of what they did, we need to understand what their definitions of sexual orientation and gender identity are. But first, ask yourself, what is sexual orientation? How would you define it? Most people, I think, that is, people without a bigger, darker agenda, would likely agree that sexual orientation means who you're attracted to, i.e. who you orient towards. Most people are attracted to the opposite sex. Some people are attracted to the same sex. Some people are attracted to both. Most people would agree that there are limited options: opposite, the same, or both. Is anyone disagreeing with me? But have a listen to this group's made-up definition of sexual orientation. It's important because, remember, they influence the human rights law internationally and NGOs like the United Nations. So their definition of sexual orientation is understood to refer to each person's capacity for profound emotional, affectional, and sexual attraction to and intimate and sexual relations with individuals of a different gender, the same gender, or more than one gender. Sexual attraction and sexual relations with people of all sorts of genders. See what they did there? They moved on in with gender, not sex. We didn't even know that we would one day be forced to accept their definitions, did we? The reason I have used an orangutan here is no other beast in the animal kingdom is having a gender identity crisis, are they? Think about it. Thank you. If not, why not? Because it's not real. It's created. It's man-made, excuse the pun. It's causing great harm to children and families. What is their definition of gender identity? It's a bit of a mouthful. It is understood to refer to each person's deeply felt internal and individual experience of gender, which may or may not correspond with sex assigned at birth, including the personal sense of the body, which may involve, if freely chosen, the modification of bodily appearance or function by medical, surgical or other means, and other expressions of gender, including dress, speech and mannerisms. Crikey. By minimising sex and amplifying gender in law, the door is now thrown wide open for body modification to be normalised, biological reality to be minimised and erased, and for people to disassociate from their biological reality. I don't need to convince you that this isn't going to end well for humanity, is it? Think about furries. Think about 100 different genders and all the weird stuff being taught in school and fetishes being normalised online. You see how we got here? They put gender into law and then gender became whatever they wanted it to be. Can you see why our kids need us? Anything but biology and the truth. Who wants this? Who benefits? Think back to the people who developed the principles. A transhumanist, transsexuals, not ordinary people like you and I. They're wanting to normalise their actions and perversions. And they're also creating a lucrative industry, which I call the TQ industry. These principles have been developed to future plan so that people can do and be whoever they want, and they are protected by law and policy, whether that includes grooming, pedophilia, children being taught that they might be born in the wrong body. The solution to their trauma and identity distress is to mutilate, castrate and sterilise themselves, even though they say that gender is fluid and can change, and parents must go along with it, or else the child will suicide, which are lies that have been debunked in the Cass report. To question this is now outlawed and maligned in media, education and society. Teachers who believe gender ideology will tell our kids that heterosexual is uncool. The inversion of society is complete, as if adolescence wasn't hard enough. From primary school, children are taught that they are sexual from birth, that their born sex may not relate to their gender, that gender is a fluid feeling that may change. The strategy of bringing this in through international human rights law is a masterful stroke. Now we are living through the result of this happening very strategically while we were going about our ordinary lives, having no idea of this plan. Parents like me were in school ourselves when this was cooked up. We have raised our kids having no idea what was about to hit us, in school and online, and have no tools to rebut it. Often families with both parents working, so perhaps are less in tune with what's going on nowadays than in previous generations. How convenient for them. And we now have no legal clout either, because that was removed while we had no clue what they were up to. Parents' rights have been reduced or removed and replaced with children's rights, which isn't nearly as good as it sounds. The key words in the title of the 2017 YOGYAKARTA Principles publication are sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and sex characteristics. Meet the gender unicorn. Who's seen this before? A couple of you have seen it? An example of total lies being taught to our kids like it's truth. Gender is fiction. Unicorns are fiction. It is widely used in New Zealand schools in their relationships and sexuality education classes. It was developed by a pro-trans law firm. It's used all over the world now. See? The same words. It's pushed on New Zealand kids by family planning, which is now called sexual wellbeing Aotearoa. They say that their resources are in 50% of our schools. Sexual orientation is gone, which never needed to be taught anyway, replaced with gender identity, gender expression, physical attraction, emotional attraction, and sex assigned at birth. So now apparently the doctor assigns the sex of a baby. Apparently it's not obvious. God help us all. Seriously. They have successfully manipulated law under the guise of inclusion to the point that we are now not allowed to state the obvious and the biological reality. This ideology has not disappeared with the removal of the RSC guidelines, because schools are continuing with their lessons as before the removal of the guidelines. Because the organisations who push this class material have continued as normal. I have evidence of that in my research, and teachers must believe that they have to teach these topics. They never seem to get the memo. When parents question the RSE content, which more and more are, they are largely treated with disdain. I have seen a number of communications from school leaders and teachers which disrespects the parents' genuine concerns and care for their children. The YOGYAKARTA principles were initially non-binding, but now significantly shape New Zealand's human rights, public service strategies, legislation, educational policies, and sex education. This includes the Public Service Commission's Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Plan for 2024 and 2025. Let Kids Be Kids has published a white paper on this, which will be available online after the convention. The two key acts that reinforce this harmful ideology are the Births, Deaths and Marriages Relationships Registration Act 2021, which allows individuals to self-identify their gender on birth certificates without medical requirements such as their name and their gender. It impacts on sport, education, access to children, bathrooms and society at large. A question for us all: are our children more or less safe with this legislation? Less. Right. The other one that it impacts is the Conversion Practices Prohibition Act 2022. Counsellors cannot assist children who have been ideologically influenced or led to believe that they are born in the wrong body to consider the root trauma or possibility of indoctrination. Instead, they must only affirm gender confusion and body misalignment. Parents contact us saying that they cannot find a counsellor or therapist that will get to root cause. They all want to prescribe hormones and work towards transitioning the child. This is the harm of such legislation. And weirdly, this is conversion therapy. A little more evidence on the United Nations impact on New Zealand's children. I received an Official Information Act response from the Ministry of Education in May this year. This is the first time I've spoken about it, so I hope this gets out. I asked them to provide titles of all documents that they referred to in the new draft currently being written that they're going to draw on, and they stated that they refer to the United Nations Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education. This document that the MOE is referring to is the one up here. At Let Kids Be Kids, we have been raising concerns about this document for 2 years. Other groups like ours worldwide have been raising alarm bells for many years, since it came out in 2018. All are ignored by government and policymakers. Our current RSE curriculum and recently removed guidelines are pretty much copied and pasted from this and is dripping with the very ideological content that I have just discussed, and much worse. So what are you personally, and what is New Zealand First, willing to do in the run-up to New Zealand's election to fix what certainly is an ideological takeover of legislation, policy and Crown agencies? We are seeing social engineering coming through our education. It doesn't look like it's been corrected under the current coalition government. Knowledge is power, and hopefully my time with you today has been informative, if not exactly positive. So my question is, we slid off the cliff and there was a very broken ambulance at the bottom, but how do we climb back up? At Let Kids Be Kids, we considered submitting remits, but I felt that first we needed to become more informed, because everyone who cares about our future generations needs to wrap their heads around this. It's really big. And I'm done working only on the low-hanging fruit. We need to get to the core of the issues that are assaulting our society. We need to investigate how this happens so that it can be corrected. My desire is that the following are investigated. all DEI policy and legislation. And by the way, Tulsi Gabbard, who's my hero, is doing a phenomenal job of this in America, of chasing down the woke agencies and shutting them down and saving the American taxpayer millions and millions of dollars. I want to see that here. I would like to see an investigation into all of the trends in rainbow charity funding. I would like to see an investigation into the media and why that they only support that narrative and are not very nice to anyone who questions it. I would like to see an investigation into the Human Rights Commission and their support of it. I would also like to see an investigation into the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health. New Zealand First is the only party above 5% where I think it's possible to have a conversation about how we address this, how our nation has become ideologically captured. Are you all up for it? Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. There are a number of people here from Let Kids Be Kids Network who are dotted all around the country. If you are one of those people, can you just stand up now, please? Cool. I know there's about a dozen of you. As the convention progresses, please go and seek them out if you recognise them, because there's a lot of people in the room that actually have quite a lot of knowledge about this topic. Otherwise, I usually get a bit swamped. And if you need to see the madness to believe it, I've got a copy with me of a lesson currently being run in a boys' school in the South Island for 14-year-olds, which I was just sent this week. Seeing is believing. We have lots of information online on Let Kids Be Kids and on Penny Marie. Please get informed about this. We're also founding members of something called the International Coalition for Children with other groups like ours around the world, and we are convening in Washington, DC in about 3 weeks' time to take on the World Health Organization. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much to Julian in particular, who personally invited me, and to the Right Honourable Winston Peters and the New Zealand First leadership for inviting me to speak. 2 years ago, I spoke on my son's school board, and now I'm here speaking to you all. I hope this encourages many more people to get out there researching and speaking up for our future generations. We can all do something. Thank you.